The 31st National Reporting Conference Vision Korea Megyoung Media Group Project. Mail Media Group brings to you Vision Korea Megyoung Media Group Project for creating a knowledge powerhouse of the 21st century. Since 1997, over the last 25 years, Megyoung Media Group has continued to conduct joint research with domestic and global think tanks to set forth future-oriented national agendas with action plans to implement them. So far, a total of 30 such national reporting conferences have formulated future visions for the Republic of Korea, bringing huge changes in our economy and society. Now, Vision Korea is indeed positioning itself as a genuine repository of future policies of a nation. Tackling the climate crisis is a matter directly linked to the survival of humanity. With a sense of urgency, the whole world has started to race towards the common goal of net zero. Against this backdrop, Vision Korea is looking for its future growth engines in those enabling innovative technologies for net zero emissions, C-Tech. Already, centering around major economies, technology development and investment are explosively growing in C-Tech industry. Thus, we will gauge its massive transfer growth, identify technologies that will change the fundamentals of carbon-intensive manufacturing-centric Korean economy, and also present solutions for winning in the emerging global decarbonized market. Now, through C-Tech revolution, let us start on the grand transformation to become a climate-advanced economy that leads the global economy.
네, 여러분 안녕하십니까?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all to the 31st Megyoung Media Group Vision Korea. I am Jung Ah-young, anchorwoman at MBN. I will be your host today. Thank you very much for your presence at this early hour. As you have just seen on the video, the theme at this Vision Korea is Winning Formula C-Tech Race. C-Tech is climate technology, which comprises all the technologies that can reduce carbon emission. As the world vies for climate technology, we will present the way forward for Korea. The report to be presented soon is a product of 3 months of consultation by the Megyoung Media Group's Vision Korea project team, together with the global consulting firm McKinsey & Company and experts of different parts of the world. International organizations like the GGGI as well as Bloomberg NEF took part as research partners as well. We will now first hear from Chairman Jang Dae-won of the Megyoung Media Group. He is joining us this year from a very special force. Let's meet him via video.
Distinguished guests from home and abroad, hello. I welcome you all to the 31st Vision Korea, organized by Mail Media Group. I am now standing in the forest situated amid a desolate field. But why do we call these seemingly soulless concrete structures a forest? It is because they can directly suck in greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and store them just like a forest does. Yes, the very carbon dioxide that we have emitted, direct air capture, or DAC in short, is a technology for directly capturing carbon. Climeworks, Carbon Engineering, and other like-minded DAC startups are bringing such dreamlike technologies into reality, intent on taking out carbon from air in response to the climate crisis. These dream catchers were once dismissed as having economically unfeasible dreams. Yet no more. 3 years ago, carbon credits in Europe were priced at less than 2 euros, but have now soared to 90 euros and above, which is 128,000 Korean won. With the advancement of technology, input costs have come down, and with credits rising in value, business viability of DAC will go up even higher. Visionaries like Amazon, Microsoft, and other global big techs have invested billions of dollars in these startups. Big techs that have gone all in AI and big data investment are now looking to invest in carbon neutral technology, or CTEC, as their next investment destination to achieve carbon neutrality. The rationale for this is clear. With the advent of the carbon neutral era, a massive market is about to emerge on the horizon in the CTEC field. To reach carbon neutrality by 2050, global energy and infrastructure system transitions will require approximately $275 trillion of capital injection. That is, for each year, on average, $9.2 trillion, or over 10 quadrillion and 100 trillion won of investment will be needed. To get a share of this enormous pie, promising CTECs are bound to come forth en masse. Let's now take a look at outer space. CO2s in the air are being captured and utilized for fuel in the spaceship development project. Greenhouse gases are being monitored in a satellite network research project in the outer space as well. Do you see this artificial sun here? With only 1,000 tons of hydrogen, the whole world will be able to use electricity all throughout year thanks to this nuclear fusion technology. And this vision may become a reality earlier than we think. Underwater data centers, as well as technologies for storing captured carbon in the deep seabed, will come to see the light soon. State-of-the-art technologies are literally vying for dominance in earnest. CTEC race is now about to begin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I'm very happy to have you here. Thank you for your time again. So the jacket I have on right now is quite special indeed. It was about to be thrown out as an old stock, but this was used for upcycling. So going beyond recycling to add eco-friendly ideas or technologies to create new values. Upcycling is another such field of C technology. As you have seen from the video, the DAC is also a case in point in the CTEC industry. This is not only in our imagination, but what you see over here is a real facility that is in operation in Iceland, Reykjavik. And the economic repercussions of CTEC are indeed enormous. The CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, that you probably are all aware of, said that in climate technology, more than 1,000 unicorns will emerge going forward. The symbol of the carbon economy, those oil giants, are now shifting away from oil and gas fields towards climate-resilient technology development. They are embracing the fundamental changes of the economic paradigm while investing for the future. And yet, crises and opportunities coexist as we speak. The curse of the carbon economy, a so-called carbon shock, is unfolding before our very eyes. Oil, natural gas, and other energy prices are jumping to all highs across the world. The wave of carbon neutrality has triggered greenflation, which is increasing prices due to a green transition and going beyond to promoting a destructive crisis called green swan in the economy. And without innovative CTECs or innovation, the shock we will have to bear will become even greater. Ladies and gentlemen, the war in Ukraine has reminded us all again of the importance of energy security. Even the advanced countries in Europe are now working to reduce their dependence on the Russian natural gas by securing nuclear power plants as well as CTECs in earnest. For resource-poor Korea, CTEC is the only path towards energy security. Not only energy security, as a matter of fact, I know that there are many CEOs who are joining us today. And what would be the biggest challenge facing Korea? Isn't it that there are no viable growth engines for the future of Korea? And CTEC promises to become the breakthrough to overcoming such stalemate that we all experience in Korea. And Korea is a manufacturing country with large carbon footprint. There are many drawbacks that we need to overcome. Yet, if we can lead the innovation, we will be able to open the doors to limitless opportunities. And many developing economies, including those in Asia in particular, are looking to Korea for such technological breakthroughs. To sum up, CTEC is a climate responsive, climate resilient technology. This is to pass down a cleaner environment to posterity, and this is also a carbon capture technology for removing carbon. Global economic system will be realigned and reshaped into carbon capture capitalism, and I'm very sure of that. And governments and businesses that are able to utilize carbon well will become the winners in the new game. Now is high time that we secure the winning momentum for CTEC innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Zhang. Thank you once again. Next, we will hear greetings by Chairman Antoso of the Presidential Transition Committee. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Now, it is a great pleasure for me to be meeting with so many luminaries at this early hour. And also, I would like to express my gratitude to Chairman Jang Dae-hwan, as well as all the members of the Mail Business News for addressing such important issues of Korea on a timely manner. Now, it was in 2019 when I was a visiting scholar at the Stanford Law School, and at that time I had the pleasure of meeting with the former Vice President of the US, Al Gore. And this is what he told me. In 2006, he produced a film entitled The Inconvenient Truth. He also wrote a book about it, and at that time he still had hope. He had hope because now he was winning the Academy Award and even the Nobel Peace Prize, and then he was hopeful that things were going to change. But what we had actually seen was things getting worse. So now, today, the newly emitted CO2 is over 100 million tons, and within 1 year, it is over 50 billion tons. Now, actually, the air, so let's say if the CO2 is 1 ton, then can you imagine how heavy it would be? So even 1 ton we cannot imagine, but not it's not 1,000 or not even 10,000 tons, but then it's actually over 100 million tons. So that is really beyond our imagination. So Vice President Al Gore was saying that it is now almost impossible for the Earth to go back to what it used to be. Still, he was traveling all over the world, sending messages about climate change. Because if we are to leave it alone, then we do not know what kind of catastrophe would await us at the end. Now, I'm sure that you all know that the climate crisis, or today, we actually call it not climate crisis, but for example, people like Bill Gates calls it the climate disaster. So climate change or the climate catastrophe, it's not just about the winter getting colder or summer getting hotter. It's also about extreme drought, extreme flooding, and also massive wildfire, and even food crisis, for example, stemming from disruptions to farming. For example, some farming countries, because of the extreme weather conditions, their harvest of grains could plummet, which could drive many in the population into famine. And also, of course, today we're all wearing masks, and they said that even COVID-19 has been caused by climate change because the wildlife ecosystem has moved and crept closer to the human habitat. And in order to address this really serious issue, in other words, in order to ensure the human survival, we must move toward carbon neutrality. Now, having said that, the problem is there are so many sources of carbon emission. So, for example, members in the public as well as among the politicians, there is this misunderstanding. And that is, if we can all change the source of our power generation, in other words, if we can just switch to non-carbon emitting source for power, then we can solve this problem. But there are largely 5 sources of carbon emission. Of course, it would also depend on the people or the countries. But then now, first of all, the biggest emitter, so that takes up about 30% of all carbon emission, and that is manufacturing. And especially steel making and cement, we are getting quite a lot of carbon emission. So that is one. And another, it takes up about 26%, and that is coming from power generation. And then about 19% is coming from agriculture and livestock. So livestock, when we grow like cows or pigs, then the methane that is being emitted there, it is actually affecting the global warming more so than any other types of gas. Then also the transport methods. So for example, airplanes or vehicles, so that's about 16%. And then heating, air conditioning, that is emitting 7%. So these are all the different sources of carbon emission. And if we are to move closer to our goal of carbon neutrality, then we also need to develop new technologies for each and every one of these 5 major categories of carbon sources, and which is a really tall order to begin with. If I may give you one example, now I served as an independent director of POSCO for 6 years. I also served as the chair of the BOD. Now, when you are producing steel, then in order to produce steel without emitting CO2, it entails quite a complex method because steel is a combination of steel and oxygen. That is Fe4 I'm sure you all know that. So we have to get rid of O, which is oxygen, from this. And right now, we get rid of the oxygen using CO, carbon dioxide, meaning that we can get steel, but what remains is CO2. So then what we're going to do is, now what they're trying to develop is the Redux methodology. So that is about from Fe and O. So they're going to get rid of O, and they will be using hydrogen in order to get rid of O from the FeO. And then what remains would be the H2O and steel. H2 meaning water. So that is the technology that they're trying to develop. It is not there yet. And also for just one company, POSCO, they say that it will take about 40 trillion won, meaning that this is a challenge that is way beyond a single company. In other words, there are a lot of intricacies and challenges involved, but this also means that perhaps we can turn this around as our opportunity, and I believe that we must do so. In the field of CTech, if we are to take the leadership, then we can commercialize this technology, and as the leading CTEC country, we can also export the technology, leading to greater economic benefits and promoting more economic activities and even creating unlimited number of jobs. So from the Presidential Transition Committee, what we are mostly interested in is also this particular topic. And personally, I believe that the future of Korea will depend on science and technology. In other words, we need to make sure that the science and technology is at the center of our economic development so that we can take another leap forward. So I do hope that we will be able to learn a great deal from today's reports and presentations. And I hope that, and we will try our best at the Transition Committee to reflect them into our policymaking as well. Thank you.
네, 말씀 잘 들었습니다.
Thank you very much for your insightful words. I'd like to take this moment to thank Presidential Transition Committee Chair Antoso once again. Next, we're going to invite Jung Jae-hoon, McKinsey partner, and also Lee Jae-woon from the MBN reporter, the manager, to deliver the presentations. We will look at the video first.
Now it's the Earth. The erstwhile silent Earth has now thrown the mankind into an existential challenge. The name of the challenge is net zero. We must reduce CO2 emission and absorb the remaining greenhouse gas to keep the actual emission to zero to sustain mankind on this Earth. The international community agreed to turn ourselves into a new civilization, to no longer depend on fossil fuel as it has done so for the past 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. And so began the age of decarbonization. But the problem is, most of the climate technologies, or CTEC, that would help carbon reduction, climate measurement and analysis, and transition to clean energy do not exist or are just now being developed. This also means those who preempt innovative CTEC can capture the leadership in the new decarbonizing economic ecosystem. Governments around the world are moving fast, coming up with carbon-neutral policies and investing heavily in CTEC R&D and support. For example, leaders in space technology are busy developing space-based solar power to launch satellites with solar panels to generate power 24 hours, then to distribute it back to Earth by converting it to laser or microwave. And countries like the US, Japan, and China that lead CCS, which captures carbon, liquefies it under pressure, then stores it below the seabed, are vying against each other to preempt the fossil fuel-dependent Asian market. Globally, investment into CTEC startups has jumped 16-fold in 8 years, from $1 billion in 2012 to $16 billion in 2020. Which is triple the growth of investment in AI. This has driven the growth in CTEC-based startups to more than 3,000, who are focused on addressing carbon neutrality using new technologies like AI, machine learning, cloud, autonomous driving, and robotics. One example is Heliogen, which boasts unique power generation technology. It uses AI to direct countless mirrors in one direction to reflect sunlight, generating heat at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. 15 years ago, these startups would change the world with a few lines of codes, and now it is happening in the climate economy. How is the climate economy going to reshape the global hegemony? Mail Business News will now review the CTEC trends and offer the winning formula for Korea.
Since the Industrial Revolution in 1760, everything is now about to change with the net zero transition. Global political, economic, diplomatic, and even military systems are now being reshaped around the net zero race. The net zero is a global systematic transition or universal transformation taking place at a breakneck speed. McKinsey & Company estimates that in this process of great transformation for the next 30 years, a total of $9.2 trillion every year, or 1 quadrillion and 1,000 trillion won of investment will have to be made annually. Of that amount, new additional investment required is 4,000 trillion won. At the beginning, costs were shared for the great cause, but not anymore. This is a future-oriented investment for facilitating sea-tech development. This enormous cost of getting to net zero is already impacting the global economy and industries across the board. Due to carbon emissions leading to a mismatch in supply and demand, crude oil prices have posted an all-time high in 9 years, and also magnesium prices have soared 200%. Against this backdrop, carbon regulations around the world are getting tougher than ever. This will further drive up the cost of attaining carbon neutrality. The analysis conducted by McKinsey predicts that by early as 2030, generation costs will rise by more than 20%. The production cost of steels, the critical input for industries, is expected to increase around 13% by 2030. The cost of getting to net zero will raise the prices of various industrial and consumer goods in the broadest sense. In this universal transformation, those that are able to turn the crisis into an opportunity will become winners, and those that don't, losers. The key is sea-tech. Countries and businesses that will gain an edge in the market with sea-tech will be able to turn the crisis into an opportunity. In 8 years from now, by 2030, more than 9,000 trillion Korean won market will open up for us. Across various industries, 11 key markets will emerge, among which transportation, building, and power sectors will top the list, creating approximately 50% of the total value. Advanced countries are now going all out to become winners in the sea-tech race. For the one who wins the race will take up the wealth of the next generation. The United States has pledged to put in, over the next 10 years, $1.7 trillion in the net zero transition, with Japan and the UK following suit with huge amount of investment as well. Now, leading the race is the EU, now committed to investing 1 trillion euros. The gigantic waves of global investment that have captured opportunities are now flowing towards sea-tech. First, our co-leader, McKinsey Sustainability Senior Partner Daniel Pechtold, will tell us the scale and speed of changes in sea-tech.
We do feel that we're a bit in a similar world than we were 25 years ago at the beginning of digital, which is there's a massive influx of capital, of also startup innovation, of also incumbents building new technologies, and ranging from all colors of hydrogen to long duration energy storage to next generation materials to alternate proteins, etc. I think what has happened in Europe around green steel, I think has been really impressive. And I think we've actually seen, if you want, green steel production scaling rapidly. And then I think what's also been surprising is the order books for some of these new green material companies are already filled up for the next 3 or 4 years.
Next, McKinsey's sustainability practice leader in Asia, Senior Partner Rajat Gupta, will share with us his insights on sea-tech opportunities.
Our own assessment is that there are about 10 of them that are going to be the most important. I'll give you a few illustrations of the obvious ones. There's, of course, renewables to modify or change the power systems. There's mobility, electric vehicles particularly. There is storage, which is going to be critically important to support many of these sectors. And there's hydrogen for industrial decarbonization. There's CCUS, carbon capture use as well as storage. There's technologies that will come to play in agri and food chains. There's site recycling, which is going to be critically important, and as important, to support role from carbon markets.
As you have just heard, the sea-tech race has already begun, and its starting line is never equal for all the players. According to the McKinsey analysis, advanced economies in the West have already started the race at the front. The so-called pole position, taking the advantage of starting ahead of all the other players in the game. Then, emerging developed or developing countries would have to bear a bigger cost for the transition to net zero. The world's eighth largest carbon emitter, Korea, is seen as a country with the largest risk of the net zero transition among advanced economies. The soaring commodity prices are now shaking the Korean economy at its roots, eroding trade balances and driving down stock prices and currency value of won. Moreover, the stringent carbon emission regulations of advanced economies will become the new trade barriers for export-driven companies in Korea. Jobs will also be dealt a heavy blow. The net zero transition will remove, by 2050, 185 million jobs across the world, 60% of which will be in the automotive generation and petrochemical fields, which are the key industries for Korean companies. And yet, Korea does have the potential and strength to break through the crisis. The assets required for the net zero transition were analyzed for each country as to how much they had them in store. Where does Korea stand in all this? To our regret, Korea didn't have much PV, wind, minerals, and other environmental assets. However, we had the necessary technological assets and human assets for the net zero transition. This was one of the best in the world. Korea can tackle the crisis and seize the opportunity. The very key to that lies here. If advanced technologies and sophisticated human resources are fully mobilized, Korea will be able to capture enormous business opportunities through the C-Tech innovation. By 2030, 9,000 trillion won of C-Tech market will be created, and if only 1.5% can be taken up by us, we will be able to create 140 trillion won of opportunities and jobs equivalent to 1 year worth of semiconductor exports. Then how can we deliver this opportunity and enjoy its benefits? First of all, C-Tech should be the clear agenda and stories for the leaders of our country and businesses who are here. This cannot be just passed on to your junior associates. Never. And second, defense. A reluctant defense attitude should give way to an offense, a proactive approach to making opportunities and leveraging them actively. That is the mindset we need. And this is indeed challenging. This requires collective efforts. Not only those other players in the industry, but also investors must come on board the innovation ecosystem. This is a must. Lastly, speed is also critical. You must not wait until everything has been flawlessly studied to make decision. If 80% of the most important things have been decided, then never wait for the rest to be defined. Be quick and nimble to make decisions. In McKinsey's book, No Ordinary Disruption, the speed of future changes will be 10 times faster than the Industrial Revolution, 300 times larger in its magnitude, and 3,000 times stronger in its repercussions. The future of Korea now hinges on us. Now, humanity is embarking on a great transformation towards a decarbonized civilization. Now, everywhere around the world, innovative C-Techs are working to bring out revolutionary changes in industries and our daily lives. Sweden's private companies and state-owned utilities are joining hands for this hybrid project, which aims to start from 2026 a mass production system for fossil fuel zero steel. This is indeed likely to revolutionize the way steel industry is run. Existing steels are made from combining oxygen in iron core and carbon from coal and separating them into a form of CO2, thus emitting massive amount of greenhouse gases in the process. Yet hybrid utilizes electricity from hydroelectric generation for electrolysis, producing hydrogen as a result to use as an input instead of coal. This does not emit CO2s but water, a truly innovative way for steel making, ushering in the era of green steels. The second most water-consuming material on Earth is concrete. In the process of making cement, which is the main feedstock, a huge level of CO2 is produced. Canada's Cabri-Crete uses iron slags and industrial byproducts instead of cement to produce concrete compounds, which are then poured into molds and injected with CO2s recovered from other industries and left to harden to make concrete blocks. From the process of cement production, there's no emission of CO2s, but rather injection of CO2s as an input to remove carbon from concrete. Across the globe, buildings are spewing so much carbon, which would be equivalent to CO2s emitted by a country as large as China. In particular, building elevators, pumps, HVAC systems need electric motors to be operated, and this is the main culprit behind carbon emission. Now, Turntide from the US has developed a smart motor system that enables an accurate amount of current to flow into the systems as needed, thereby enhancing energy efficiency and cutting emission. Right now, Amazon and BMW have introduced these motors to reduce their energy consumption by 64% on average. If all buildings adopt these motors by 2040, we would be able to mitigate carbons that would be equivalent to having 7 Amazon rainforests. In the aviation industry as well, such innovation is taking place. In 2020, the UK's startup called Zero Avia became the world's first company to succeed in using hydrogen fuel cells as a source of power to fly an airplane on a pilot basis. Only air and vapors are emitted from the operation of the airplanes, giving birth to fully eco-friendly airplanes. And from 2024, the 19-seater hydrogen-run airplanes of Zero Avia are scheduled to fly the regular routes between London and Rotterdam. And thanks to C-Tech, carbon emissions will be dramatically lowered in cities, and carbon-free hydrogen planes will move the travelers around in the foreseeable future.
In the F1 racetrack, there are blind corners. Those are the corners that are obstructed and where the driver can't see ahead. That is where Korea is today. It is trying to find its way in blind corners. There are largely 4 obstacles that are holding back Korea's future. First is climate policy changing with every change in government. The policy that needs decades-long perspective is overturned every 5 years. Second, the industry and experts' voice was ignored in carbon neutrality policymaking. It has resulted in insufficient response for workers and SMEs. Third is the damaged energy ecosystem. One example is phasing out nuclear power plants. The nuclear power ecosystem, which would have been the center of carbon neutrality, has collapsed. Fourth is fragmentation in climate response capability. Korean businesses and government organizations had to fend for themselves in disconnect from each other. Korea must overcome these obstacles to become a C-Tech power. As the winning strategy for Korea, we now propose GRIP. GRIP. GRIP is the driving technique that lets you quickly escape the corner without the tire slipping. First, G is for growth. At the heart of the new government's economic policy, there must be C-Tech. Korea's C-Tech R&D is only 0.3% of GDP. But if the investment is increased by just 30%, revenue will increase by 75 trillion won by 2030. Jobs will grow by 375,000. 11% of Korea's GDP will come from C-Tech. First thing to do is to set the stage for businesses. Tax breaks and deregulation are a must. Give them a strong push all the way to solid commercialization. Secure demand by public procurement from the government side and purchase requirements from the private side. Not only push for technological development, but give them the faith that if you build it, we will buy. Utilize the East and West Coast for commercialization. If we can reduce unnecessary programs and spending by local governments, it will help achieve a more balanced development of the regions. Work toward low-carbon technology projects for the 4 key industries at the East Coast Clean Tech Innovation Belt. Launch a net zero framework where the government and businesses can design the projects together and work toward demonstration and commercialization. In the West Coast, there is a cluster of coal-fired power plants. We can turn the West Coast into a mecca for carbon tech startups, along with the Saemangum International Energy Innovation City. Once the coal-fired power plants shut down, the West Coast can be upgraded to SMR parks for small modular reactors. For CTEC to reap rewards in the market, more capital must flow into nascent companies. CTEC must be installed in TIPS, which is the private investment-led tech incubator program for startups. It will lay the basis for an industry to develop. R. Redesign. To jump into the race, the government and its policies must be redesigned. The Environment Ministry's Climate and Environment Mandate and the Science Ministry's Climate Technology Mandate should be integrated with the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy and turned into a Ministry of Industry, Energy and Climate with the Deputy Prime Minister at its helm. But combining the ministries will be easier said than done. One alternative is to benchmark the White House organization and install a presidential climate policy office. It should be elevated to a pan-government agenda overseen directly by the president. The 20 or so committees scattered all over the place should be combined into one low-carbon science and technology committee to direct and lead the CTEC R&D effort. R&D should be left to the real experts, who should be entrusted with the necessary authority. Normalize the unrealistic carbon-neutral scenario. We need a more finely tuned plan to lessen the burden on the people and businesses. Nuclear power should be included in the Korean green taxonomy, as is the case in Europe. The most urgent and important is adjusting the energy mix. The graph on the right-hand side is the approximate energy mix that we propose. Gradually increase nuclear energy to 40% by 2050. The basis for this is the current technology level and sharply rising power demand. It will help achieve not only carbon neutrality and energy security, but also have the expected increase in electricity tariff. Extend the permit for all of the 10 NPPs that are currently scheduled to be shut down to lower the share to 35% by 2030. Construction must resume for Shinhanul numbers 3 and 4 as early as possible. More than 8 large NPPs must be additionally built. Of course, increasing nuclear energy also has challenges such as site selection and distribution and transmission. Work must continue to seek better alternatives. There should be no more policy swings with every change in the government. Please start enabling collaborative governance. Through a bipartisan consultative body, work toward a climate infrastructure act that will prop up the CTEC ecosystem. Let's listen to Bloomberg NEF, an energy transition analysis provider.
Continuity in decarbonization policies. This is critical to accelerate the energy transition. Korea's new administrations, and we have a new government coming in, have had a tendency to scrap key energy policies implemented by the previous administration. Hopefully, we'll see more bipartisan efforts to improve the continuity of Korea's decarbonization policies.
Next is I, incubation. It's about incubating the basis for the future. Create a mass production system to produce 20 SMRs a year. We can expect an economy of scale. The SMR industrial ecosystem thus formed will then be the basis for green mobility, green hydrogen, and also energy export. SMR also benefits security. SMR technology can be used to build Korean nuclear-powered aircraft, carrier, and submarines. It will grow the nuclear industry and bolster our military capability. Last is P, partnership. Strike an energy alliance with the U.S. and Japan. With the U.S., the current push for bilateral NPP export cooperation should be elevated to a nuclear energy alliance. It will strengthen ROC-U.S. alliance. Propose hydrogen and electricity alliance with Japan. It could help break out of the current stalemate with Japan. For CTEC to have a virtuous cycle, we must preempt developing markets. To that end, we should have the international organizations hosted in Korea, like GGGI and GCF, as our strong allies. We must actively utilize carrots like official development aid. Let's listen to one international organization, GGGI.
So far, mostly funded through Norway and Sweden and soon Germany. Korea has come a little bit slower to this particular subject. Japan, for instance, has already made MOUs with quite a few countries, so on what kind of conditions they might be willing to trade. So yes, we're hoping that for the next government probably will take the opportunity to work with us.
Last, suggestions to the businesses. Do not rely solely on the government. Create a CTEC business alliance. Just like the global companies in the First Movers Coalition, Korean businesses must be at the forefront in our march towards CTEC leadership. The post-COVID era is coming. CTEC will be at its center. We must lead, not follow. That strategy is grip. We must grip, grip. There is no more time to waste. Thank you.
Right now, we're faced with the climate crisis, and I believe the presentation was very meaningful indeed. I'd like to thank our two speakers. Now, regarding our Vision Korea, we will have a pre-recorded message of encouragement from the Speaker of the National Assembly, Park Byung-seok. Hello, I am Park Byung-seok, the Speaker of the National Assembly. I congratulate you on the opening of the 31st Vision Korea. Vision Korea each year has put forth blueprints for the future of the Republic of Korea. I would like to commend the organizer of this very meaningful event, Chairman Chang Dae-hwan of the Maegyeong Media Group, executives and employees, for their very hard work. The theme of today's Vision Korea is Climate Change Response Technology, or CTEC, which is now emerging as the most interesting industries since the advent of artificial intelligence. CTEC will be an opportunity for economic growth and a core pillar of national energy security. And as such, key economies around the world are thus entering in this space one after another. In the CTEC competition, Korea should take on an offense to develop the domestic as well as the global market. The government and the National Assembly, therefore, should help manufacturing companies to decarbonize their operations, as well as support entrepreneurs to actively move into the CTEC industry. Any barriers or obstacles, if any, should be removed, and industrial leadership in the net zero era should be reinforced. Support will be called for in this regard. The government and private sector must join hands to gain an upper hand in competition. The National Assembly, for its part, will endeavor to improve environmental regulations and go beyond to lower entry barriers to the CTEC industry by legislating a relevant promotion act. In closing, I hope today's Vision Korea will mark a major milestone in presenting the way forward for Korea's industries. Thank you very much. Yes, that was a pre-recorded message sent from the Speaker of the National Assembly. Thank you very much. And this concludes the 31st Vision Korea. And before we close this event, let me make an announcement. There's a media art being exhibited outside. This is a media art which is created jointly by Cologne Sports and fan communication called Antarctica. This work expresses the landscape of Antarctica now being transformed into climate change. Please be sure to take a look at it on your way out. Mail Business Newspaper will celebrate its 23rd anniversary of World Knowledge Forum this year, which is an annual event held since 2020. This year, we'll be having an event from September 20th to 22nd for 3 days. And we also have a small gift prepared for you on the front desk on the first floor. And this concludes our event. Thank you very much for your time, and have a safe way back home. Thank you.